I've been woodworking for a number of years. I started when I was like 15 years old, and that was, believe me, a long time ago. Um, I have lately started getting into building other things out of wood. I build musical instruments, guitars, violins, mandolin is my current project. So I don't do a lot of turning, but I have been working with wood for a pretty long time. Um, I've had this kicking around my shop for 60 years. I turned this when I was like 15 or something like that. So that was the very first thing I ever turned and stopped turning um, for a long time. The one thing that everybody does every time they walk up to the lathe is grab a piece of wood. And that's where I really wanted to start today, is to talk about wood, what it is, how to um, enjoy it, how to feel what the structure is and how to use it. So wood is basically made up of two different polymers. There's cellulose and there's lignin. Cellulose is a crystallized polymer that creates long, thin tubes, like kind of like that. And the lignin is another polymer that I like to think of as glue that glues the fibers together to make a solid structure. So that's what it's made of. Lignin is, because it's a polymer, it can be heated, and when it's heated, you can change the shape of it. If you let it cool, you can form the wood into different sorts of shapes. So as instrument builders, John brought this in. Um, we heat up the wood, thin wood, to like 300 degrees Celsius, something like that, and then put it in a form, let it cool, and the lignin solidifies so that it'll keep its shape, um, like like this piece. There are two different types of trees that are in existence. There's trees that do not have do not have needles or cones, are called deciduous trees or hardwood trees. The other type of tree has needles or cones, and those are conifers. So pines, firs, those sorts of things are conifers. They are typically softer than hardwood trees. So let's talk about the anatomy of a cross section of a tree. When mommy tree and the daddy tree get together and they decide they want a seed, they name them pith. The pith is the first part of the tree. It's a sapling. It's the center of the tree, and that's where the tree grows from. The heartwood is next in line. Heartwood is dead cells. The the As the tree grows, the interior of it dies and forms the hardwood part. The hardwood is a structure that holds the tree up. Basically, it's the structure of the tree. These are examples of. I got a piece of cherry here that has the heartwood in the center. It's the reddish part, and the sapwood is next. There's also a piece of walnut, and I'll pass these around, and you can look at those. The sapwood is the part of the tree that takes the water and transports it up the tree. So it goes up the tree to the leaves or the needles, and um, it evaporates, if you will, through transpiration. The tree breathes and it breathes out water. A fully active growing tree can go through between 50 and 100 gallons of water per day through this process. It's an amazing amount. And also that water can go up 100 feet or more, which is truly amazing. I don't know if there are any engineers. Pumping water up that far is next to impossible. But the trees do it naturally without any real moving parts. So that's the sapwood. Every um, every year, as the tree grows, there's a growing season and then a dormant season. Every season, the tree will put one annular ring uh, out in diameter. So the only living part of the tree trunk itself is the next layer called the cambium layer. The cambium layer is just a few cells thick, and as the tree grows, it splits those cells and adds new ones on the outside as the tree grows. So in 1 year, a tree will grow, what, an eighth of an inch or whatever it is. So that happens in the cambium layer. The inner bark is another layer that moves nutrients down to the root system. So the water goes up through the sapwood and down through the inner bark. Called a, well, there's another name for it. And then there's the outer bark, and the outer bark is a protective layer that helps uh, retain the moisture of the plant and also protect it from knocks. Okay, we talked a little bit about the grain structure. Think of a tree as a bunch of straws. The straws are arranged vertically as the tree grows. So this is what we call side grain. This is end grain. Okay? So those two things will run into while you're turning wood. End grain is difficult. Side grain is easy to cut. Okay, let's talk about actual logs. So I've got an example here. I think this is a piece of pecan, if I'm not mistaken. I follow the Kent Weekly method of cutting logs in half. That is, you measure the distance. Oh, oh, okay, got it. Okay, if you measure this distance and this distance, and they're the same from the pith, that's the line you would use to cut. And I cut them right down through the pith to the other side. Now sometimes you don't have a perfect log and you don't know um, which of these distances make more sense. So the blue line here, if I cut it that way, through the pith, it would twist 90 degrees. So that's kind of an issue. You have to choose one and go with it. But always want to split the pith if you can, because that relieves the most stress. When you turn the blank, you don't want it to contract or expand too much if you can help it. So anyway, split the pith. Yes. Okay. Let me answer that question for you. There are several different ways. Well, let's talk about shrinkage first. Green wood shrinks. I'm pretty sure you all run into that before. Dry wood does not shrink as much. Green wood will shrink between 8 and 10% of its width in from side to side. This is a piece of wood I made a desk years and years ago. You can tell that the grain is running this way in the big piece, but it's running across this piece of wood. Happens to be a pull-out writing surface for a desk that I built. Okay. Now, being a follower of Norm Abrams in this old house, if you ever join a piece of wood this way, you have to be very careful. If you were to glue this piece of wood on top of this piece of wood, as the humidity changes, this will swell in this direction up to 8 to 10%. So if you glue this together, it's going to split, is basically what's going to happen. So this piece is only glued in the center 2 inches or so that when it does expand and shrink, it doesn't crack. Okay, so I made this in the winter in Minnesota, and if you've ever been in cold country in the winter, the humidity is basically non-existent. It's super dry. So I made this board and I put it in my desk, and I forgot about it until the summer. I went back in the summer. I could not pull this out of the desk. It was physically impossible. It eventually shrank enough where I could pull it out of the desk, and I did resized it, and now it fits just perfectly. If you want to come up and feel this, this is still wider now than it was when I cut it. You can feel that it's about 32nd or 16th or 64th or something. Yeah, exactly. Question? The question is, when you cut a log, do you go through the pith and leave the pith there, or do you make 2 cuts, one on either side of the pith, and throw that away? What I would do is cut it through the pith. By the time you mount the blank in your lathe and turn the bottom of the bowl, if you're doing a regular bowl, and turn it around, you're going to have to cut a layer off the flat part of the bowl off of this side, and you will remove the pith, if that makes sense. Okay, another question? Same question. Okay. You, you, you can do that as well. Or you can leave the pith in turn the bowl, and I've got an example of that as well. It's if you can, one of the preferred way is to, and this is probably a worse example I could find, but most logs are not going to have their pith that far off center. This is a branch, I'm sure, instead of a trunk of a tree. So most logs you won't have that problem with. And basically it doesn't matter. I mean, if you can, you want to remove as much stress as you can before you turn, but if you can't. I mean, throw the piece away. So that's what I would do. And I've turned things without doing that, without using this method, and they come out fine. It's just a matter of what you want to do. There's 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 3 ways to do it, and let's get into that. Oh, I'm sorry. Um, the question was if I cut this log on this line that lines up on the top, it comes out wrong on the bottom. So is that a problem? You won't relieve as much stress as you could, but it is what it is. You got no choice on a log like this. Okay, so there's three ways to cut a log in half laterally like this that I can think of. The first is split it. You go down to Harbor Freight and get yourself a splitting wedge or an axe or something, and you just split the log in two. You put your splitting wedge on the pith and let it flop apart. That's actually probably a pretty good way on most logs because you will the splitting wedge won't wander. It will go through the wedge in almost every case. Second way is to grab a chainsaw and to run the chainsaw through the log lengthwise. Chainsaws are very, very dangerous. You have to be careful when you use them. The first thing when you look at the safety of a chainsaw is to use one of these. This is my helmet. It's got a crash guard, it's got hearing protection, and it's got eye protection. So if you've got a chainsaw, I would highly recommend that you get something like this, or at least wear eye and ear protection. With electric chainsaws, the ear protection isn't as important as it used to be. This is my electric chainsaw, and they're getting better. I was really quite surprised. The only gripe I have about this chainsaw is that the chain loosens a little bit too often. Oh, also, you'll notice this red part. Never, ever, ever use that part of the chainsaw to cut something. If you do, it will kick back at you. My brother was using a chainsaw and he kicked back, and now he's my half brother. Um, my Ace Hardware will sharpen a chain for $10, which is really I think it's an excellent deal. So check out your local Ace or whoever, and have them sharpen your chains regularly. In between times, I grab my chainsaw file and touch it up. But if you were ever cutting a log and you go into the ground, the dirt, take your chainsaw and rev it up in the air and throw the dirt and crap away from it. Also, chainsaws require lubrication. You have to put bar and chain oil in the chainsaw, even if it's electric. So remember to do that. I personally do all of my bowl blanks on a bandsaw because I have one. I got a big bandsaw that I can push the trees through. Never, ever, ever push a log through a bandsaw in this direction. It will catch, it will turn, it will break your blade or your chainsaw, or I mean your bandsaw, one or the two. And also, never ever cut on the side of a log because it'll do the same thing. It'll twist. You have to have the blade completely centered in the log so there is support. Also, what I do, and I've got a lot of success doing, is setting the log up vertically and push it through the bandsaw that way. That allows you also to cut the bottom of the bowl off so you can have a flat surface and two flat surfaces to work with. So that's a pretty good way to do it if your throat is big enough to handle the log you're dealing with. Okay, the next thing is after you have after you have the log cut, it saves a little time if you cut the corners off. So I use these cardboard circles. I got them in various widths, and you just project the the circle down onto the log and use some big black marker and draw a circle, and then you can safely put that half log without the faceplate down on a bandsaw, and you can cut the corners off. Do not try and cut the corners off this way. That will not be good. Okay, holding the blank after you're done. There's five ways that I could come up with to hold a blank in your lathe while you turn it. There's the faceplate, which I have here, which I believe is the safest way to do it. You you can put this onto the lathe. You really don't even need to put the tailstock up, and you can rough out the blank that way. Don't ever use sheetrock screws to attach the faceplate to your blank. Use sheet metal screws. I use number 6 or number 8 sheet metal screws. Sheetrock screws. I'm sorry, sheetrock screws. Drywall screws. Use sheet metal screws, number 6, number 8, the bigger ones like that. So that's one way. The other common way, well, let me get that first. Another way is to use a woodworm screws. These come with your Nova chucks. Most people have a Nova chuck. A lot of people have them anyway. You can drill a hole into your blank, screw this in, and then you can clamp this down with your chuck, your Nova chuck, and use that to attach your blank and round your blank over. That's another really safe way to do it. I've had a lot of success with these. They're kind of piddly to put in and take out. That's why I prefer faceplate. The next one is the spur center, and a lot of people use these. I use these exclusively when I'm doing live edge bowls. Live edge bowl isn't conducive really to a faceplate, and so this is a really good way to do it. It also allows you to align your edges correctly if you're doing a Don Geiger type of bowl like this. This has to be aligned perfectly this way so that you have the tilt in these two directions correct in order to get a properly formed Don Geiger bowl. So that's where I use the spur center a lot. There's also something called a safety center, which is a really nice tool to add to your lathe. The safety center is, I only use it for spindle turning. I don't use it for bowl turning because I don't think it holds very well in bowls. It tends to, well, I don't know, I don't use it. And the last way is a chuck, a Nova chuck or, variants of a chuck to hold the wood. Okay, so there are basically 3 ways or 4 ways to orient the grain to turn a bowl. There's this way that most people are used to. You cut the log in half and you mount the faceplate or whatever to the pith side of the wood. And then you turn the bottom of the bowl, put a tenon on it, turn it around, and then turn the inside of the bowl. So that's one way one way to turn the grain. The other way is the live edge, and you do it pretty much the opposite way. You put the bark side against the spur chuck, and you turn the bottom of the bowl, put a tenon on it, then turn the inside of the bowl. And you get this nice little live edge. And like we were saying earlier, if you have a log that's longer than it is wide, you'll get this funky oval shape. You can also turn the bowl with the pitch on the bottom, pith on the bottom. So that's the way this bowl was done. One of Miss Colleen's bowls. The other one I've never tried, and that's to attach the log like this and turn all end grain. I would imagine that on a piece of dry wood like this, it's going to be not much fun. Not much fun at all. It's going to be very difficult to cut and hard on your tools. So those are the ways that I can think of to mount a blank. Free wood. Where do you get wood? I've heard a number of people in the club saying that they don't have any or they can't find it. Facebook Marketplace is a wonderful source. All you have to do is go on Facebook Marketplace, type in free wood, and you'll get 10 or 15 people that cut down trees and they want it out of their yard. So it's a really good place to go and try. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? This is a piece of wax myrtle, that, terrible invasive plant that hangs out. And I was gonna be really smart, and I'm gonna show how wood shrinks, and it's gonna get all funky in shape, and it didn't crack. I literally cut this down on Tuesday, took it into the shop and turned this, and I was waiting for it to fail, but it didn't. So I have no idea why. Water was a little bit, a little bit. Water was literally dripping out of it while I was turning it. But the part, the end of it that I used to chuck it up, got this huge split in it. So anyway, free wood